My name is Victoria Chen, and I'm 58 years old. What I'm about to tell you will sound impossible, but every word is true. The funeral for my husband David was held on a gray Thursday morning in October, the kind of day where the sky looks like it's mourning alongside you. I stood there in my black dress, the one David always said made me look elegant, watching as they lowered his casket into the ground. My daughter Emma held my left hand. My son Michael held my right. And I remember thinking that this was it. This was the moment my life split into before and after. The pastor was saying something about dust and ashes, about eternal rest, words that floated past me like smoke because I couldn't focus on anything except the horrible finality of that wooden box disappearing into the earth. And then my phone buzzed in my purse. I almost ignored it. Who checks their phone at a funeral? But it buzzed again, insistent, demanding attention. Emma squeezed my hand tighter, thinking I was about to collapse, but I pulled away gently and reached into my purse with trembling fingers. The screen showed a text from an unknown number. I'm alive. Trust no one. My knees buckled. The phone slipped from my hand, and Michael caught it before it hit the ground. He looked at the screen, and his face went completely white. "Mom," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Who sent this?" I couldn't answer, because my throat had closed up, because my heart was hammering so hard, I thought it might burst through my ribcage. Another message came through. "Victoria, it's me. David, I need you to act normal. Don't react. They're watching you right now." The cemetery started spinning. 23 years of marriage, and I knew my husband's texting style. The way he always used proper punctuation. The way he wrote my full name when something was serious. This was either really him, or someone who knew him intimately enough to mimic his patterns perfectly. Emma was pulling at my arm, asking if I was okay, her voice high and worried. Michael still held my phone, staring at it like it was a bomb about to explode. I forced myself to breathe, to nod, to pretend I was just overwhelmed with grief and not completely losing my mind. "Look at the casket," the next message read. "That's not me inside. Check the funeral home records. Director's name is James Whitmore. He'll deny everything, but check his bank account from 3 weeks ago. $50,000 deposit from an offshore account." I lifted my eyes and scanned the crowd of mourners. About 40 people had come, colleagues from David's accounting firm, neighbors from our street, old college friends, my sister Patricia with her husband, David's brother Robert standing alone near a large oak tree. Any one of them could be watching me. Any one of them could be part of whatever insane conspiracy this was. The pastor finished his prayer, and people began approaching to offer condolences, their faces blurring together into a mass of sympathetic expressions and murmured sorries. I shook hands mechanically, accepted hugs, thanked people for coming, all while my mind raced through possibilities. David had been sick for 6 months. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The doctors said there was no hope. I had watched him waste away in our bedroom, had held his hand during chemo sessions, had been there when he supposedly took his last breath 3 days ago on Monday morning at 5:17. Dr. Sarah Martinez had pronounced him dead. The funeral home had collected his body. I had identified him, had touched his cold hand, had kissed his forehead goodbye. How could that man not be David? My phone buzzed again, and I snatched it from Michael's hand. "Go home after this. In our bedroom closet, behind the shoeboxes on the top shelf, there's a manila envelope. Inside, you'll find a USB drive. Don't let Emma or Michael see it. Don't tell anyone about these messages. Your life depends on your silence." I looked up sharply and my eyes met Robert's across the cemetery. David's younger brother, always the charmer, always the one with the easy smile and the complicated business deals. He was watching me with an expression I couldn't read. When our eyes met, he looked away quickly, too quickly. Patricia came up and wrapped her arms around me, crying into my shoulder about how unfair life was, how David had been taken too soon, how she couldn't believe he was gone. Her grief seemed genuine, but then again, I was starting to question everything I thought I knew. The funeral director, James Whitmore, stood near the grave with his hands clasped in front of him, professional sympathy etched into every line of his face. He was a small man in his 50s, with thinning hair and wire-rimmed glasses. Could he really be part of this? Could he have been bribed to participate in faking a death? Michael touched my elbow. "Mom, we should go. People are starting to leave." I nodded and let him guide me toward the car. Emma walked on my other side, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. They were both devastated, both lost in their own grief, both completely unaware that their mother's entire reality had just shattered into pieces. As we drove away from the cemetery, I twisted in my seat to look back one more time at the grave where my husband supposedly lay. The workers were already filling it in, shoveling dirt onto the casket with rhythmic thuds that echoed in my chest. If David wasn't in that box, then who was? Comment below where you are watching this from and what time it is right now. The drive home from the cemetery felt like it took hours, even though our house was only 15 minutes away. Michael drove in silence, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. Emma sat in the back seat, staring out the window with tears streaming down her face. I clutched my phone in my lap, checking it every few seconds for new messages, but nothing came through. My mind was a hurricane of questions and impossible scenarios. If David was really alive, why would he fake his death? Who was helping him? Why couldn't he trust our own children? And most terrifying of all, who exactly was watching me and why? We pulled into the driveway of our 2-story colonial house, the home where we'd raised our kids, where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays, where David and I had slow danced in the kitchen on our anniversary just last year before the cancer diagnosis. Now it felt like a stranger's house, like everything familiar had been replaced with an identical copy that was slightly wrong in ways I couldn't quite identify. Inside, the living room was already filling with guests who had come back after the funeral. Neighbors brought casseroles and sympathy. David's co-workers from Henderson and associates stood in clusters talking in low voices. Patricia was in the kitchen organizing food with the efficiency of someone who needed to stay busy to avoid falling apart. I moved through the crowd like a ghost, accepting condolences, nodding at appropriate moments, while my thoughts screamed that this was all wrong, all fake, all part of some elaborate theater I didn't understand. Robert cornered me near the fireplace. "Victoria," he said, his voice gentle but his eyes sharp. "I know this is a terrible time, but we need to talk about David's accounts, his assets, the business he was working on before he got sick. Can we sit down this week and go through everything?" "Not now," I managed to say. "I can't think about that right now." Of course," he said quickly, holding up his hands. "I understand. But soon, okay? There are time-sensitive matters that need attention." I nodded and moved away, my skin crawling. David and Robert had gone into business together 5 years ago. Some kind of financial consulting firm that I'd never fully understood. David had always handled our finances, had always told me not to worry about the details. Now I wondered what details I should have been paying attention to. Emma appeared at my side with a glass of water. "Mom, you need to drink something. You look pale." I took the glass and sipped, the water tasteless in my mouth. "Sweetheart, I need to lie down for a bit. Can you and Michael handle things down here?" She nodded immediately. "Of course. Go rest. We'll take care of everyone." I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, each step feeling like a monumental effort. Inside, I closed and locked the door, then leaned against it, my heart pounding. The closet was a walk-in, David's clothes still hanging on his side, his shoes lined up neatly on the floor. I had thought about donating them, but hadn't been able to face it yet. Now I realized maybe some part of me had known, had sensed something was wrong. I reached up to the top shelf where we kept old shoeboxes full of receipts and warranties and forgotten items. Behind them, pushed far back against the wall, my fingers found a manila envelope. I pulled it down, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. Inside was a small USB drive, black and unmarked. There was also a note written in David's handwriting. "Victoria, if you're reading this, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything I've put you through. I couldn't tell you the truth because knowing would have put you in danger. I still don't know who I can trust, but I know I can trust you. The USB contains everything, all the evidence I've gathered over the past year. I discovered something at the firm, something that involves millions of dollars and people in positions of power who will do anything to keep their secrets buried. When I started asking questions, they threatened me. Then they threatened you and the kids. Faking my death was the only way to protect you while I figure out how to expose them. I need you to take the USB to someone I trust, a federal agent named Catherine Ross. She works out of the downtown FBI field office. Give it only to her, no one else. Tell her David sent you. Tell her it's about Project Clearwater. She'll understand. Don't try to look at what's on the drive yourself. The less you know, the safer you are. I'm watching over you as best I can from hiding. I love you. I've always loved you. When this is over, I'll explain everything." The note wasn't signed, but I recognized every loop and curve of his penmanship. I read it 3 times, my vision blurring with tears. Project Clearwater, the FBI, millions of dollars. Threats against our family. It sounded like something from a movie, not from our quiet suburban life of soccer games and tax returns. I grabbed my laptop from the desk and searched for James Whitmore, the funeral director. His business website showed a smiling professional man offering compassionate services in difficult times. I dug deeper, finding his social media profiles, his business registrations. Then I did something I'd never done before. I accessed David's personal laptop, the one he'd used for work, using the password I'd seen him type 1,000 times. His email was still logged in. I searched for Whitmore's name and found an exchange from 4 weeks ago. "Mr. Chen, I understand your unique situation. The arrangements you've requested are highly unusual, but can be accomplished for the fee we discussed. All records will show standard procedures. I guarantee complete discretion. Wire the funds to the account number below, and we'll proceed as planned." My stomach twisted. David had paid Whitmore to fake his death. But where had he gotten $50,000 without me knowing? I opened his bank statements and found a withdrawal from a savings account I didn't know existed. An account with over $200,000 in it. Money I'd never seen, never knew about. My phone buzzed. I jumped, nearly dropping it. "Did you find the envelope?" the message asked. "Yes," I typed back with shaking fingers. "Who's in the casket?" "A John Doe from the county morgue. Terminal patient with no family who died the same day I was supposed to." Whitmore made the switch. "No one will ever check." "This is insane," I wrote. "David, if this is really you, Why didn't you tell me? I couldn't risk it. They were listening, watching. I think someone in the family is involved. That's why you can't tell Emma or Michael. One of them might be compromised without knowing it. My blood went cold. What do you mean, compromised? I mean someone close to us has been feeding information to the people I'm investigating. I don't think they know they're doing it. They might be dating someone, or friends with someone, or working with someone who's connected to this. I can't take the chance. A knock on the bedroom door made me nearly scream. "Mom?" Emma called through the door. "Are you okay?" Michael and I are worried. "Just a minute, sweetheart," I called back, shoving the USB drive and note into my pocket. I splashed cold water on my face in the bathroom and tried to compose myself into something resembling a grieving widow instead of a woman whose entire life had just been revealed as a lie. When I opened the door, both Emma and Michael stood there with identical expressions of concern. Emma was 25, a graphic designer with her father's dark eyes and my stubborn chin. Michael was 23, fresh out of college and working at a tech startup downtown. They were good kids, successful, and kind. And the thought that one of them might unknowingly be connected to whatever conspiracy had forced David into hiding made me want to lock them both in their old bedrooms and never let them out. "Everyone's starting to leave," Michael said. "Aunt Patricia wants to know if you need her to stay over tonight." I shook my head. "I'll be fine. I just need some time alone." Emma's eyes were red from crying. "I can stay if you want. I don't like the idea of you being here by yourself." I forced a smile. "Really, I'm okay. You both have work tomorrow. Go home, get some rest. We'll talk this weekend." They both hugged me, and I held on maybe a second too long, breathing in their familiar scents and wondering how I was supposed to protect them from something I didn't even understand. After they left, I went downstairs to say goodbye to the remaining guests. Patricia was the last to leave, fussing over me and making me promise to call if I needed anything. Robert left with her, but not before giving me another reminder that we needed to discuss David's business affairs soon. Finally, the house was empty and silent. I locked all the doors and windows, checking them twice, then 3 times. The USB drive felt like it was burning a hole in my pocket. I wanted to look at what was on it, wanted to understand what had driven my husband to such desperate measures, but his note had been clear. The less I knew, the safer I was. But how was I supposed to get to the FBI office downtown without being followed by whoever was watching me? My phone buzzed again. "Tomorrow morning, go to the grocery store like normal. Take the bus downtown instead of driving. You'll be harder to follow on public transportation. Get off at 5th and Main. The FBI field office is 2 blocks north. Ask for Catherine Ross. Give her the drive and nothing else. Don't tell her about these messages or that you've heard from me. Just say you found it in my things and David told you before he died to give it to her if anything happened to him." I typed back, "What if she doesn't believe me? She'll believe you once she sees what's on the drive. Victoria, I need you to trust me. I know I've broken your trust by lying about everything, but I'm trying to keep you alive. These people have already killed 3 other people who knew about this. I couldn't let them kill you too. 3 other people." The words made my blood run cold. "Who?" I wrote. "Paul Henderson from the firm. He supposedly had a heart attack last year, but I think he was poisoned. Amanda Cho, one of our clients who started asking questions about irregular transactions. Car accident on the highway that the police ruled as driver error. And Thomas Brennan, an IRS investigator who was looking into some of our corporate clients. Fell down the stairs in his house and broke his neck. The police said he'd been drinking, but Thomas never drank." I sat down heavily on the couch, my legs no longer able to support me. 3 murders made to look like accidents. And David had uncovered whatever these people were hiding. I thought about the past 6 months watching my husband waste away from cancer. Or what I'd thought was cancer. David, I typed, were you really sick? The cancer, was that fake too? No, he wrote back. And I could almost hear the sadness in those 2 letters. The cancer was real. Stage 4 pancreatic, just like they said. But it was also convenient. When I realized what I'd discovered and how dangerous it was, I knew I needed to disappear. The cancer gave me the perfect cover. I could fade away, get weaker, and eventually die without anyone being suspicious. I worked with a doctor I trust to fake the final decline. He gave me something to slow my heart rate and breathing to almost nothing. In the hospital room, you thought you were watching me die, but I was actually in a medically induced state that mimicked death. Dr. Martinez was in on it. She pronounced me dead, even though my heart was still beating. Just barely. Then Whitmore took over from there. Tears were streaming down my face. I watched you die. I held your hand and felt it go cold, and I thought my heart was going to stop too. I'm sorry, he wrote. I'm so sorry, Victoria. But if they'd known I was still alive, they would have come after you and Emma and Michael to get to me. This was the only way. I need you to know that everything I did was to protect our family. Where are you now? I can't tell you that. The fewer details you know, the better. After you deliver the USB drive to Agent Ross tomorrow, come home and go back to your normal routine as much as possible. Act like a grieving widow. Don't change your patterns. I'll contact you when it's safe. How long? I don't know. Could be weeks, could be months. The FBI will need time to build their case. But Victoria, once this is over, once these people are arrested and can't hurt us anymore, I'm coming home. I promise you that. I clutched the phone to my chest and let myself cry for the first time since the funeral. Not tears of grief now, but tears of relief mixed with anger and fear and confusion. My husband was alive. He was sick and hiding and in danger, but he was alive. That night, I barely slept. Every sound made me jump, convinced that whoever was watching me had figured out I knew the truth and was coming to silence me. I kept the USB drive in my pocket, even when I changed into pajamas, afraid to let it out of my sight. At 3 a.m, I finally gave in to temptation and inserted the drive into my laptop. The files were encrypted, asking for a password I didn't have. David had made sure I couldn't access them, even if I tried. I removed the drive and put it back in my pocket, feeling both frustrated and protected by his foresight. Friday morning came with pale sunlight filtering through the bedroom curtains. I got dressed in jeans and a sweater, trying to look like someone running ordinary errands and not someone about to deliver evidence to the FBI. I made coffee and toast that I couldn't eat, then grabbed my purse and keys. The grocery store was a 15-minute walk from our house. I went there twice a week usually, so it would seem normal to any watchers. Inside, I filled a basket with items I didn't need, milk and bread and apples, moving through the aisles slowly while my eyes scanned for anyone paying too much attention to me. Near the cereal aisle, I noticed a man in a gray jacket who seemed to be shopping in the same sections as me. When I moved to produce, he followed a minute later. My heart started racing, but I forced myself to keep breathing normally, to act oblivious. I checked out with my groceries and walked out to the parking lot. But instead of heading to my car, I continued walking to the bus stop on the corner, carrying my grocery bag like I'd planned this all along. The bus arrived within 5 minutes, and I climbed aboard, taking a seat near the middle where I could watch both doors. The man in the gray jacket had disappeared, and I didn't see anyone else from the store following me. The bus wound through residential neighborhoods before heading downtown, each stop bringing new passengers and taking others away, and I studied each face wondering if any of them were connected to whatever David had discovered. At 5th and Main, I got off and walked 2 blocks north like David had instructed, my grocery bag growing heavier with each step. The FBI field office was in a modern glass building that also housed various other federal agencies. I went through security at the entrance, showing my ID and letting them scan my purse and grocery bag. They found the USB drive and held it up questioningly. "It contains some files I need to give to an agent," I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. They ran it through their scanner, then handed it back and waved me through. The directory in the lobby showed that the FBI offices were on floors 8 through 12. I took the elevator to 8 and approached the reception desk where a young woman with auburn hair sat typing at her computer. "I need to speak with Agent Catherine Ross," I said. "It's important. Do you have an appointment?" "No, but my husband told me to come see her. He said she'd understand. It's about Project Clearwater." The receptionist's fingers paused over her keyboard. Her eyes met mine with sudden intensity. "What's your name?" "Victoria Chen. My husband was David Chen. He worked at Henderson and Associates." She picked up her phone and spoke quietly into it, then looked back at me. "Please have a seat. Someone will be with you shortly." I sat in one of the chairs lining the wall, my leg bouncing nervously, the grocery bag at my feet, and my purse with the USB drive clutched on my lap. Other people moved through the office, agents in suits carrying folders and coffee cups, civilians like me waiting for appointments. Everything seeming so normal and mundane when my entire world was anything but. After 10 minutes, a door opened, and a woman emerged. She was in her early 40s, with short blonde hair and sharp green eyes that assessed me in a single glance. She wore a navy suit and practical low heels. "Victoria Chen?" "Yes," I said, standing up. "I'm Special Agent Catherine Ross. Please come with me." I followed her through a maze of cubicles and offices to a small conference room with a table, 4 chairs, and nothing else. She closed the door behind us and gestured for me to sit. "Your husband was David Chen, who worked at Henderson and Associates Accounting," she stated rather than asked. "Yes, he died 3 days ago. I'm very sorry for your loss," she said, and something in her tone made me think she actually meant it. "You mentioned Project Clearwater at the desk. How do you know that name?" "David told me before he died that if anything happened to him, I should bring this to you." I pulled the USB drive from my purse and placed it on the table between us. "He said you would understand." Agent Ross stared at the drive like it was the Holy Grail. She reached for it carefully, almost reverently, then looked back at me. "Did your husband tell you what's on here?" "No. He said the less I knew, the safer I'd be. He just said it was evidence of something he'd discovered at the firm, something involving millions of dollars and powerful people." "Did you look at the files? They're encrypted." I tried. She nodded slowly. "Mrs. Chen, I need to ask you some very serious questions, and I need you to be completely honest with me. This isn't just about accounting fraud or tax evasion. What your husband uncovered, what we believe is on this drive, involves a money laundering operation that funnels funds from drug cartels, human trafficking rings, and terrorist organizations through legitimate businesses. The people involved have unlimited resources and zero conscience about eliminating threats. If they know you have this drive or that you've come here today, your life is in immediate danger." I felt the blood drain from my face. "David said he thought someone in our family might be unknowingly compromised, that someone close to us might be feeding information without realizing it. Agent Ross's expression darkened. Did he say who? No. He said he couldn't trust anyone. That's why he told me to come directly to you and speak to no one else. She was quiet for a moment, thinking. Mrs. Chen, I'm going to be frank with you. Your husband contacted me 4 months ago, claiming he'd discovered evidence of money laundering at his firm. He said his partner, Robert Chen, was involved along with several of their major clients. He was going to meet with me to hand over documents, but then he was diagnosed with cancer, and the meeting never happened. I assumed he'd been too ill to follow through, or had decided not to risk it. When I heard he'd died, I thought the evidence had died with him. But here you are with what might be the breakthrough we've been investigating for 3 years. Robert, I whispered. David's brother. My brother-in-law. He's involved? We believe so, yes. Robert Chen has been on our radar for 2 years. We know he's moving money for some very dangerous people, but we haven't been able to prove it or figure out the mechanism he's using. If this drive contains what we think it does, we'll finally have what we need to bring down not just him, but the entire network. I thought about Robert at the funeral, watching me, asking about David's accounts and assets, pushing to meet with me soon about time-sensitive matters. He'd been worried that David had left evidence behind. He'd been trying to get access to David's files before anyone else could find them. Agent Ross must have seen something in my expression because she leaned forward. What is it? What are you thinking? Robert approached me yesterday at the funeral. He wants to meet with me this week to discuss David's business affairs and accounts. He said there were time-sensitive matters. She nodded grimly. He's looking for this. He needs to know if David left anything behind that could incriminate him. Mrs. Chen, I need you to do something that's going to be difficult. I need you to act completely normal. Go home, grieve your husband, and when Robert contacts you again, agree to meet with him. Let him think you're a grieving widow who knows nothing about her husband's business. We'll have agents watching you at all times. You'll be protected. But we need Robert to believe he's safe, that there's no evidence against him. If he suspects we're onto him, he'll disappear, and we'll lose our chance to get everyone involved. My hands were shaking. You want me to pretend everything is normal while my husband's brother, a man I've known for 20 years, a man who's been to every birthday and holiday, tries to figure out if I'm a threat that needs to be eliminated? I know it's asking a lot, Agent Ross said gently. But you're already in danger whether you help us or not. Robert knows David was suspicious. He knows you're David's widow and might have access to his files. The only way to keep you safe is to make him think you're not a threat while we build our case. Once we have enough evidence, we'll arrest everyone involved simultaneously so none of them can flee or retaliate. I closed my eyes and thought about David, sick and scared, and desperate enough to fake his own death to protect us. He'd already sacrificed so much. The least I could do was be brave enough to help finish what he'd started. Okay, I said, opening my eyes and meeting Agent Ross's steady gaze. Tell me what I need to do. She spent the next hour briefing me on what to expect and how to behave. I was to go home and resume my normal routine as much as possible. When Robert contacted me, I should seem reluctant to discuss business so soon after the funeral, but eventually agree to meet him, probably at my house where I'd feel most comfortable and in control. During that meeting, Robert would likely try to gain access to David's home office and computer. I should let him, but act protective of David's things, like a widow who wasn't ready to sort through her husband's belongings. This would seem natural and give Robert a reason to push harder, to volunteer to help go through everything. The more desperate he became, the more likely he was to make mistakes that would help our case. Agent Ross gave me a phone number that went directly to her cell and another that connected to a tactical team on standby. She also had a technician fit me with a small wireless microphone disguised as a pendant on a necklace I could wear every day. Any conversation I had with Robert or anyone else connected to the case would be recorded. When I finally left the FBI office, it was early afternoon. I took the bus back to my neighborhood and walked home from the stop, carrying my grocery bag that now felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Inside my house, I put away the groceries I'd bought as cover, and then collapsed on the couch, exhausted from fear and adrenaline. My phone buzzed. "Did you deliver it?" David asked. "Yes, Agent Ross has it. Thank you, Victoria. I know how hard this must be." "You were right about Robert. He's involved in everything. The FBI confirmed it. I know. I've suspected for over a year, but I needed proof before I could accuse my own brother." The betrayal cuts deep, doesn't it? When you realize someone you loved and trusted has been lying to you all along? His words hit harder than he probably intended. "Yes," I wrote back. "It does. I'm sorry I had to lie to you too, but my lies were to protect you. His lies were to exploit people and profit from their suffering." "There's a difference, is there?" I wrote, anger suddenly flaring. "You still lied. You still let me watch you die and grieve and break into pieces. You still made me bury an empty casket, while everyone I know offered me sympathy for a loss that wasn't even real. That's not fair, Victoria. What's not fair is that I don't get to be angry with you because you're supposedly the hero in this story, because you did it all to save us. But you know what? You also made choices for me without asking. You decided I couldn't handle the truth. You decided to put me through hell rather than trust me enough to let me help from the beginning." The typing indicator showed he was responding, then stopped, then started again. "You're right," he finally wrote. "I made choices for you, and that wasn't fair. I was terrified and sick, and I thought I was protecting you, but maybe I was also protecting myself from having to face your reaction if I told you the truth. I'm sorry." I sat there staring at those words, tears blurring my vision. I wanted to forgive him, but I wasn't ready yet. Too much had happened too fast. "We'll talk about this later," I wrote. "When you're actually here and I can see your face and know for certain this is real and not some elaborate grief hallucination. I promise we will. For now, please just stay safe. Agent Ross will take care of you." The rest of Friday passed in a strange haze. Emma called to check on me, and I had to pretend everything was normal, that I was just a sad widow trying to figure out how to live without her husband. Michael texted asking if I wanted company, and I made excuses about needing time alone. Patricia called twice, and I let both calls go to voicemail because I didn't trust myself to lie convincingly to my own sister. That night, I barely slept again, hyper-aware of every sound, wondering if FBI agents were really watching my house like Agent Ross had promised, or if I was actually alone and vulnerable. "Saturday morning," Robert called. "Victoria," his familiar voice said when I answered. "How are you holding up?" "As well as can be expected," I replied, which was true even if the reasons were different from what he thought. "I know it's soon, but I really think we should sit down and go through David's affairs. There are clients who need to know what's happening with their accounts, business obligations that can't wait, and honestly, some financial matters that affect you directly." I let silence stretch for a moment, like I was reluctant. "Robert, I appreciate your concern, but I'm not ready to think about business right now." "I understand. I do. But Victoria, some of these matters are time-sensitive. David was in the middle of several important projects, and if we don't address them soon, you could lose significant money. Plus, there might be insurance policies or benefits you don't know about. I'm just trying to help." The mention of insurance policies made my skin crawl. Was he trying to find out if David had left anything behind that I might discover? Fine, I said with a sigh that I hoped sounded defeated rather than calculating. Come over tomorrow afternoon. We can look through his office together. Perfect, he said, and I could hear the relief in his voice. I'll bring lunch. We can make a day of it. Don't bring lunch, I said. I'm not really eating much these days. Just come around 2 o'clock. After we hung up, I texted Agent Ross to let her know about the meeting. She responded immediately. Good work. We'll have a team in position outside your house. The pendant microphone will record everything. Try to get him talking about the business, about any projects David was working on before he got sick. If he mentions specific client names or transactions, that would be very helpful. Sunday morning, I cleaned the house compulsively, needing something to do with my nervous energy. I changed the pendant microphone from yesterday's outfit to today's, testing it quietly to make sure it was working. At exactly 2 o'clock, Robert's silver Mercedes pulled into my driveway. I watched from the window as he got out carrying a briefcase, his expression serious. He was 53, 3 years younger than David, with the same dark hair now graying at the temples and the same tall frame. But where David had been gentle and thoughtful, Robert had always been ambitious and aggressive. I opened the door before he could knock, and he pulled me into a hug that felt like a performance for any neighbors who might be watching. How are you really doing, Victoria? I'm managing, I said, stepping back and leading him into the living room. I gestured to the couch, and he sat down, placing his briefcase on the coffee table with a significance that made it clear this wasn't a social visit. I know this is difficult, he began, but I think you'll actually feel better once we get David's affairs in order. It'll give you closure and peace of mind. I nodded and waited, letting him lead the conversation like Agent Ross had instructed. David was brilliant at what he did, Robert continued. But he wasn't always great about documentation and organization, especially toward the end when he was so sick. I need to access his computer and files to figure out where everything stands. His office is upstairs, I said slowly. But Robert, I haven't been able to bring myself to go in there yet. Everything is exactly how he left it, and I'm not ready to change that. I understand, he said with practiced sympathy. But we really need to do this, Victoria, for your financial security. Fine, I said, standing up. Follow me. We climbed the stairs to the second floor where David's home office occupied a small room overlooking the backyard. His desk was still cluttered with papers, his computer monitor dark, his reading glasses folded next to the keyboard. The room smelled faintly of his cologne, and I had to swallow hard against genuine emotion. Robert went straight to the computer and pressed the power button. It's password protected, he said after a moment. Do you know his password? I shook my head. He never told me. It was always something related to work that I didn't need to access. Robert's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Okay, we can work around that. What about physical files? Did he keep any documents here at home? I pointed to a filing cabinet in the corner. Some things are in there. Client files and contracts mostly. But Robert, I don't feel comfortable letting you take anything without me understanding what it is. Of course not, he said smoothly. We'll go through everything together. I'll explain what each document is and why it's important. He opened the filing cabinet and started pulling out folders, spreading them across the desk. I watched as his hands moved quickly through the papers, his eyes scanning each page with an intensity that betrayed his casual demeanor. He was searching for something specific. Most of these are old client files from years ago, he muttered. Nothing current. Did David have a safe or anywhere else he might have store important documents? There's a safe in our bedroom closet, I said. But I don't know the combination. That's where he kept our passports and birth certificates and things like that. Can I look at it? Maybe I can figure out the combination. I hesitated like I was uncertain, then nodded. This way. In our bedroom closet, the small safe sat on the top shelf behind where I'd found the manila envelope 2 days ago. Robert stood on a chair to reach it, running his fingers over the dial. These usually use important dates, he said. When's your anniversary? June 14th. He tried various combinations of those numbers. Nothing. Emma's birthday? Michael's? He tried several more combinations, growing more frustrated with each failed attempt. Victoria, I really need to get into this safe. Whatever's inside could be crucial to settling David's estate. I don't know what to tell you, I said with what I hoped was helpless sincerity. David never shared the combination with me. Maybe we should call a locksmith. No, Robert said sharply, then softened his tone. I mean, that seems extreme. Let me think about this. Maybe I can figure it out. We went back to his office, where Robert continued searching through files and papers, growing increasingly agitated as he found nothing useful. He tried guessing David's computer password, typing in various combinations with growing desperation. Nothing worked. Victoria, he finally said, turning to face me with an expression that was trying very hard to remain friendly, but had an edge of something darker underneath. I need you to be completely honest with me. Did David give you anything before he died? Any documents or files or passwords? Any instructions about what to do with his work materials? I met his eyes and lied with an ease that surprised me. No, we didn't talk about work toward the end. He was too weak, and I was just trying to keep him comfortable. Our last conversations were about how much we loved each other and memories from when the kids were young. That's all. Robert studied my face for a long moment, and I forced myself not to look away, not to show any sign of deception. He seemed to relax slightly. Okay, I believe you. It's just that there are some very important files I need to locate, and I'm worried they might have been lost or destroyed. What kind of files? Client information, transaction records, that sort of thing. Some of our biggest accounts are in limbo right now, and without David's documentation, I can't properly service them. Can't the clients just provide you with the information you need? Some of them could, but others, well, they valued their privacy and only worked directly with David. They might not want to continue working with the firm now that he's gone. I nodded like this made perfect sense, even though alarm bells were ringing in my head. These were the criminal clients, the ones whose money Robert and David had been laundering. Robert was desperate to find David's records so he could either destroy the evidence or reach out to the clients and assure them their secrets were still safe. I'm sorry I can't be more helpful, I said. Maybe over time I'll remember something or find something that could help you. Over time, Robert repeated, and something in his tone made my blood run cold. Victoria, I don't mean to pressure you, but time is something we don't have much of. These matters really can't wait. What do you mean? I mean that some of our clients are not patient people. They expect certain services, and when those services are disrupted, they get concerned. And when they get concerned, they sometimes take actions to protect their interests. Are you threatening me? I asked, letting real fear enter my voice because it was genuine. No, of course not, he said quickly, holding up his hands. I'm trying to protect you. If these clients think there's evidence floating around that could expose them, they might see you as a liability simply because you were David's wife. The best way to keep you safe is to find whatever David left behind and reassure everyone that their business remains confidential. The irony of Robert pretending to protect me from the very danger he represented would have been funny if it wasn't so terrifying. So what do you suggest? I asked. Let me have access to the house when you're not here, Robert said. I can go through everything systematically without disturbing you. I'll search David's office, his computer, anywhere he might have hidden important files. Once I find what I'm looking for, you'll be safe and we can all move forward. You want me to give you a key and let you go through our private things without supervision? I made my voice sharp, offended. Robert, he was my husband. I'm not going to let anyone, even you, rifle through his belongings like he was nothing. I understand, he said, but his patience was clearly wearing thin. Then at least let me hire someone to crack his computer password. A tech specialist who can get past the security. No, I said firmly. Not yet. I need more time, Robert. The funeral was 3 days ago. I can't just erase him from my life this quickly. He stood up abruptly, and I took an instinctive step back. Victoria, you need to understand the seriousness of this situation. There are people who will not wait for you to finish grieving. If I don't find those files soon, bad things could happen. To you, to Emma, to Michael. Now you are threatening me. It's not a threat, it's a warning. I'm trying to help you, but you're making it very difficult. I think you should leave, I said, my voice shaking but determined. Get out of my house. Robert stared at me for a long moment, and I saw the mask slip completely. His face was cold, calculating, dangerous. This was the real Robert, the man who worked with cartels and traffickers, the man who had no problem eliminating anyone who got in his way. Fine, he said quietly. But Victoria, think very carefully about your choices. David made some mistakes before he died, and I'm trying to fix them. Don't make the same mistakes he did. What mistakes did David make? I asked. Asking too many questions. Sticking his nose into business that didn't concern him. Being self-righteous when he should have been practical. He was my brother and I loved him, but he could be incredibly naive about how the world really works. David was a good man, was he? Robert's smile was ugly. A good man who helped me launder money for 5 years before suddenly growing a conscience? A good man who took his cut of every illegal transaction and lived well off the profits? Don't canonize him, Victoria. He was just as dirty as I am. He just felt guilty about it at the end. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. David had been involved from the beginning. He hadn't just discovered the money laundering, he'd participated in it. My perfect husband, with his gentle ways and his moral certainty, had been a criminal. Robert saw my expression, and his smile widened. He didn't tell you that part, did he? Didn't mention that our firm's success, the nice house you live in, the college tuitions for Emma and Michael, all of it was paid for with blood money? I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Victoria, Robert continued, his voice almost kind now. We're the same, you and I. We both benefited from what David did, even if we didn't know all the details. The difference is, I'm practical enough to keep the system running and protect everyone involved, while you're being stubborn and self-righteous, just like David was at the end. And look where that got him. He died alone and scared, eaten up by cancer and guilt, leaving you to clean up his mess. Let me clean it up. Give me access to his files, and I'll make sure you and the kids stay safe and comfortable. The FBI has everything, I said quietly. The words were out before I could stop them. Shock and anger overriding my training to stay silent. Robert's face went blank. What did you say? I gave everything to the FBI on Friday. David left me a USB drive with all the evidence. Every client, every transaction, everything. It's over, Robert. He moved so fast, I didn't have time to react. His hand was around my throat, pushing me back against the wall, his face inches from mine. You stupid, stupid woman, he hissed. Do you have any idea what you've done? The pendant microphone was capturing everything. FBI agents were outside listening. I just had to stay calm and trust that they would intervene before Robert did anything irreversible. David was a fool, and now you're a fool too, Robert continued, his grip tightening. It's done, he said to whoever answered. The wife gave everything to the FBI. We need to initiate contingency protocols immediately. A pause while he listened. Yes, I'm sure. She just told me herself. Another pause. Understood. He hung up and looked at me with something almost like pity. You have maybe 24 hours before they come for you and your children. The FBI can't protect you from these people. They're everywhere. In law enforcement, in government, in places you'd never suspect. Your only chance is to run, change your identities, disappear completely. And even then, they might still find you eventually. Why are you telling me this? Because despite everything, you're still my sister-in-law, and Emma and Michael are still my niece and nephew. I don't want to see them die because of David's martyrdom and your stupidity. Get them and run, Victoria, tonight. Don't pack, don't plan, just go. The front door burst open, and Agent Ross came through with 4 other agents, all with weapons drawn. Robert Chen, you're under arrest, she announced. Put your hands on your head and get on your knees. Robert looked at me one last time. You should have made a deal, he said softly. Now we all lose. He complied with the agent's orders, getting down on his knees and allowing himself to be handcuffed. They read him his rights while I stood against the wall, my throat aching where he'd grabbed me, my mind reeling from everything I'd just learned. Agent Ross approached me after they'd taken Robert away in one of the vehicles outside. Are you injured, Mrs. Chen? Should we call an ambulance? I'm fine, I said, though my voice was hoarse and I could feel bruises forming on my neck. Agent Ross, what he said about David, about him being involved from the beginning, is that true? She hesitated, then nodded. We believe your husband participated in the money laundering operation for approximately 5 years before his conscience got the better of him. About 18 months ago, he started keeping records, documenting everything. We think he was planning to come forward, but he got sick, and then he got scared. The cancer gave him an excuse to step back from the business and eventually to disappear entirely. Everything Robert said was true? About the money paying for our house and the kids' education? I'm afraid so. The records your husband left show that he took substantial commissions on the illegal transactions. Over 5 years, he personally profited to the tune of almost $3 million. I sat down heavily on the stairs, my legs no longer able to support me. My entire marriage had been a lie. Not just the last few months when David had faked his death, but years and years of deception. Every nice dinner, every family vacation, every gift he'd given me had been paid for with criminal money. Mrs. Chen, Agent Ross said gently, I know this is a lot to process, but I need you to understand that your husband was trying to make things right at the end. He could have taken that money and kept quiet and lived out his remaining time in comfort. Instead, he gathered evidence knowing it would destroy his reputation and hurt his family. That took courage. It took cowardice, I said bitterly. Real courage would have been refusing to participate in the first place or coming forward immediately when he realized what was happening. Waiting 5 years and only developing a conscience when he was dying anyway, that's not courage, that's guilt. You may be right, Agent Ross acknowledged. But regardless of his motivations, the evidence he provided is going to help us shut down a major criminal network and potentially save lives. That has to count for something. Does David know we arrested Robert? I assume so if he's been monitoring the situation. Is he still in contact with you? I nodded. Will I be able to see him? Soon. We need to debrief him first and make sure it's safe. The people Robert was working with are going to be extremely angry when they realize their operation has been exposed. We're making arrests across multiple states right now based on the information from the USB drive, but it'll take time to round everyone up. Until we're certain you're not in danger, we need you and your children in protective custody. What does that mean? It means we're taking you to a secure location where you'll stay until we've neutralized the threat. You'll need to contact Emma and Michael and explain that you're all going away for a while. Don't tell them details over the phone. Just get them to come here immediately. Tell them it's an emergency. My children, my innocent children who had no idea their father was a criminal and their mother was now caught up in an FBI investigation. How was I supposed to explain this to them? I made the calls. Emma answered on the first ring, her voice worried. Mom, what's wrong? I need you to come to the house right away. It's urgent. Are you hurt? Did something happen? Just come, sweetheart. And call your brother. Tell him to come too. Don't explain over the phone. Just both of you get here as fast as you can. They arrived within 30 minutes, Emma's sedan pulling up behind Michael's truck in the driveway. They burst through the front door together, both talking at once, asking what was wrong, if I was okay, why there were unmarked cars on our street. Then they saw Agent Ross and the other FBI personnel in our living room, and their questions died in their throats. Mom? Michael said slowly. What's going on? I need you both to sit down. What I'm about to tell you is going to be very difficult to hear. For the next hour, I explained everything. David's involvement in the money laundering, his decision to gather evidence and fake his death, Robert's arrest, the danger we were potentially in. I watched their faces go through shock, denial, anger, and finally a kind of numb acceptance. Emma cried quietly, her hand over her mouth. Michael just stared at the floor, his jaw clenched. Dad was a criminal, Emma finally said. All these years, he was working with cartels and traffickers? He wasn't the man we thought he was, I confirmed, and neither was your Uncle Robert. So everything we have, everything we've worked for, it's all tainted, Michael said. Our educations, our cars, this house, all of it came from criminal activity. The FBI will likely seize assets that can be directly traced to the illegal funds, Agent Ross interjected, but that's not your concern right now. Right now, we need to get you all somewhere safe. For how long? Emma asked. As long as necessary. Could be weeks, could be months. We can't risk the people your father betrayed coming after you for revenge. Can we at least pack some things? Michael asked. A small bag each, Agent Ross allowed. But we need to move quickly. We're already exposed here too long. 20 minutes later, we were in an unmarked SUV heading out of our neighborhood. I watched our house disappear in the side mirror and wondered if I'd ever see it again, if anything about my life would ever be normal again. The safe house was a nondescript ranch in a rural area about 2 hours from the city. It had basic furniture, a stocked kitchen, and absolutely no personality. This is where we'd be living for the foreseeable future, prisoners of our husband and father's choices. That night, after Emma and Michael had gone to their assigned bedrooms, I sat in the small living room staring at my phone. David hadn't contacted me since before Robert's arrest. I didn't know if the FBI had taken him into custody too, or if he was still in hiding somewhere, still sick, still alone. I typed out a message. "Are you there?" The response came after several minutes. "I'm here. I know everything now. About your involvement, about the money, about all of it. I'm sorry you had to find out that way. How could you? How could you work with those people? How could you profit from their crimes for 5 years? I was weak and greedy and stupid." When Robert first approached me with the opportunity, he made it sound almost legitimate, just some creative accounting to help wealthy clients minimize their tax burden. By the time I realized the truth, I was already complicit. And then it was easier to keep going than to face the consequences of stopping. Easier for who? Not for the victims of the cartels and traffickers whose money you laundered. Not for our children who have to live with the knowledge that their father was a criminal. You're right. Nothing I say can justify what I did. The next few days in the safe house passed in a strange, suspended reality. Emma barely spoke, spending most of her time in her room or staring out windows. Michael was angry, pacing constantly, asking Agent Ross questions she couldn't or wouldn't answer about the investigation timeline and what would happen next. I fluctuated between rage at David's betrayal and grief for the man I'd thought he was. The texts between us became less frequent as I struggled to find words that could encompass the enormity of what he'd done to our family. On the 4th day, Agent Ross arrived with news. "We've made significant progress," she told us in the living room. "Based on the evidence your husband provided, we've arrested 23 individuals across 7 states, including 3 high-ranking cartel members, 5 corporate executives who were using their companies to launder money, and multiple financial professionals who facilitated the transactions. Robert Chen has agreed to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence." "What about Dad?" Emma asked, the first question she'd directed at Agent Ross since we'd arrived. "Where is he?" "He's safe and in our custody. He's been providing additional testimony and helping us understand the full scope of the operation." "Will we see him?" "Soon. He's asked about all of you constantly. He wants very much to speak with you." "I don't want to see him," Michael said flatly. "He's not the person I thought he was." "That's your choice, and we'll respect it," Agent Ross said. "But Mrs. Chen, he's specifically requesting to see you. Will you meet with him?" I thought about saying no. About letting him suffer with the uncertainty of whether I'd ever forgive him. But I also thought about 23 years of marriage, of the good times before I knew the truth, of the man who had danced with me in our kitchen and held my hand through my mother's funeral and cried when our children were born. That man had existed even if he'd also been someone else, someone I didn't know. "Yes," I said, "I'll see him." The meeting was arranged for the following day at a different secure location, a small office building that the FBI apparently used for witness interviews. Agent Ross drove me there herself, briefing me on what to expect. "He's lost more weight," she warned. "The cancer is progressing, and he's refused further treatment. He says there's no point since he's probably going into witness protection anyway, and will spend whatever time he has left testifying in trials. How long does he have? Months at most. Maybe less." The reality of David's mortality hit me again. Whatever anger I felt, whatever betrayal I was processing, he was still dying. We were still running out of time to resolve anything. They brought him into a small conference room, and I barely recognized him. He'd lost at least 30 pounds since I'd last seen him alive in our bedroom. His skin had a grayish pallor, and his eyes were sunken, but when he saw me, they filled with tears. "Victoria," he whispered. We were alone, but Agent Ross was watching through a one-way mirror, and everything was being recorded. I sat down across from him at the table, my hands folded in front of me to keep them from shaking. "You look terrible," I said. "So do you." We stared at each other across the scarred table surface, and I saw the whole history of our marriage in his face. The young man who'd nervously asked me to dance at a friend's wedding. The new father who'd held Emma like she was made of glass. The husband who'd surprised me with roses on our 10th anniversary. The patient who'd apologized for being such a burden during his illness. All of those versions of David were real, and all of them were also a lie. "I don't know where to start," he said. "How about the beginning? When did you first start working with Robert on the money laundering?" 6 years ago. A client came to Robert with a complicated financial situation that needed creative solutions. Robert asked me to help structure some accounts and transactions. At first, I really thought it was just aggressive tax planning. Then I realized the money was coming from illegal sources, and I should have stopped then. But Robert convinced me that we weren't doing anything wrong, that we were just providing financial services, and what the clients did to earn their money wasn't our responsibility. "When did you know for certain?" "About a year in. One of our clients got arrested in a drug sting, and I saw his photo on the news. That's when I understood we were laundering money for cartels." I confronted Robert, and he admitted everything. He said we were already in too deep, and if we tried to stop or go to the authorities, the clients would kill us. He said the only safe option was to keep our heads down and keep doing the work. "And you believed him?" David nodded miserably. "I was terrified, Victoria. These weren't just white-collar criminals. They were people who murdered rivals and tortured informants. Robert showed me photos of what happened to a lawyer who'd tried to report one of our clients to the IRS. They found him dismembered in his car. I couldn't risk that happening to you or Emma or Michael." "So you kept laundering money for 5 more years?" "I kept laundering money, and I kept taking my cut because by that point I'd rationalized it. I told myself we needed the income, that I was protecting the family, that I didn't have a choice. But the truth is, I got comfortable with it. The money was good, and after a while it became easy to ignore where it came from. Until it wasn't easy anymore. The cancer diagnosis was a wake-up call in more ways than one. I realized I was going to die, and I'd spent years profiting from evil. I couldn't face dying without trying to make it right. So, you started gathering evidence. I started keeping copies of everything. Transaction records, communications with clients, Robert's instructions on how to structure the accounts. I documented it all, and I planned to bring it to the FBI. Then the cancer got worse, and I got scared again. I was worried that if I came forward, the clients would retaliate against you and the kids. That's when I decided to fake my death. If they thought I was gone, they'd have no reason to hurt my family. Except they did have a reason once they found out you'd given evidence to the FBI. Robert made that very clear when he threatened me. David's face crumpled. "I never wanted you involved in any of this. That's why I tried to keep you at a distance from the investigation. But you left me that USB drive. You made me the messenger. I needed someone I could trust completely, and you were the only person I was certain would do the right thing. Victoria, I know I've destroyed everything. I know you probably hate me, and I deserve that. But I need you to understand that everything I did, from the beginning until now, was because I loved you and our children. I just made terrible choices about how to protect you." "Love doesn't work like that," I said quietly. "Love doesn't mean lying for years. Love doesn't mean profiting from violence and suffering. Love doesn't mean making choices for other people without their consent. You didn't protect me, David. You protected yourself and your comfortable life and your guilty conscience." He flinched, but didn't argue. You're right. I was selfish and cowardly. I wish I could go back and make different choices. I wish I'd had the courage to say no to Robert from the beginning, or to come forward immediately when I realized what we were doing. But I can't change the past. All I can do is try to make amends now. How? How do you make amends for this? By helping the FBI dismantle the entire network. By testifying at every trial, even though it means spending what little time I have left in courtrooms instead of with my family. By making sure that every single person involved in this operation faces justice. It's not enough, but it's all I have to offer. What about us? What about Emma and Michael and me? What happens to us after you're gone? You'll be safe. The FBI has assured me that once we've arrested everyone involved, there'll be no reason for anyone to target you. You'll be able to go back to your lives. Back to what lives? Our home is going to be seized because it was bought with illegal money. Our reputations are destroyed. Emma and Michael have to live with the knowledge that their father was a criminal. And I have to figure out who I am after spending 23 years married to someone I didn't really know. Victoria. Please, his voice broke. Please don't hate me. I can't die knowing you hate me. I don't hate you, I said, and realized it was true. I hate what you did. I hate the choices you made. I hate that you lied to me and put our family in danger and profited from evil. But I don't hate you. You're still the man who made me laugh when I was sad, who held me when I was scared, who was a good father even if you weren't a good person. I don't know how to reconcile those two versions of you, but I'm trying. Can you ever forgive me? I don't know. Maybe someday. But right now, I'm just trying to survive each day and help our children process this nightmare. I can't worry about forgiveness yet. That's fair. He reached across the table like he wanted to take my hand, but stopped himself. How are Emma and Michael? Devastated, angry, confused. Michael doesn't want to see you. Emma hasn't said either way, but she's barely speaking to anyone. David closed his eyes, and I saw tears leak from the corners. I've destroyed them. They'll never look at me the same way again. Probably not. But they're strong, and they'll survive this. We all will because we don't have any other choice. When I got back to the safe house, Emma was waiting in the living room. How is he? She asked quietly. Dying, and full of regret for what that's worth. She was quiet for a moment. I want to see him. Are you sure? I don't know if I'm sure about anything anymore, but he's still my dad. Even with everything he did, he's still my dad, and he's dying. I can't let him die without saying goodbye. I called Agent Ross, and she arranged for Emma's visit the following day. Michael maintained his refusal to see David, and I didn't push. Everyone had to process this in their own way, and Michael's anger was his shield against the pain of betrayal. Over the next 2 weeks, the FBI continued making arrests and building their cases. Agent Ross kept us updated on the progress. The evidence your husband provided has led to indictments of 37 individuals so far, she told us during one of her briefings. We've seized over $200 million in assets and shut down the primary money laundering channels the cartels were using. This is one of the most successful operations we've conducted in years. What does that mean for us? I asked. When can we go home? Soon. We've arrested all the major players, and most of the network has been dismantled. There are still some lower-level associates we're tracking, but they don't pose a significant threat to your safety. We're planning to relocate you back to your area within the next week. Back to our house? Agent Ross's expression turned sympathetic. I'm afraid the house has been seized as part of the asset forfeiture. It was purchased with proceeds from the criminal activity, so it's subject to confiscation. The same applies to David's car and several other assets. However, Your personal belongings will be returned to you, and you'll have access to any money in your accounts that can't be directly traced to illegal transactions. So we're homeless, Michael said bitterly. We have nothing. That's not entirely true. Your mother has her inheritance from her parents, which was never involved in David's activities. You both have your own savings from your jobs. You'll need to downsize significantly, but you won't be destitute. Just publicly humiliated and financially ruined, Emma added. I reached for both my children's hands. We're alive, and we're together, and we're not going to prison. That's more than we could have had if your father hadn't tried to make things right at the end. We'll get through this. We returned to the city 3 weeks after Robert's arrest. We couldn't go to our old house, which now had government seizure notices posted on the door. Instead, Agent Ross helped us find a small rental apartment in a different neighborhood, somewhere we could start over without constant reminders of what we'd lost. David remained in FBI custody, his health declining rapidly. The doctor said he had maybe a month left. Emma visited him twice more. Michael never did, and I could see the regret starting to creep into his anger, even though he couldn't bring himself to relent. I went to see David one final time in early December. He was in a hospital bed now, too weak to sit up for long periods. The cancer had spread everywhere, and the pain medication kept him in a haze most of the time. Victoria, he said when he saw me, his voice barely a whisper. I didn't think you'd come again. I almost didn't, but I needed to tell you something. He waited, his sunken eyes focused on my face. I've been thinking about forgiveness and what that means. I can't forget what you did or pretend it didn't happen. I can't say that everything is okay between us because it's not. But I also can't carry this anger and betrayal forever because it's destroying me. So I'm choosing to forgive you not because you deserve it, but because I need to let it go so I can move forward. Tears rolled down his hollow cheeks. Thank you. That's more grace than I have any right to expect. There's something else. What? I still love you. Not the same way I did before I knew the truth. But there's still love there for the man you were in the moments when you weren't being someone else. I'm going to hold on to those good memories and try to let the rest fade. I love you too, he whispered. I've always loved you even when I was lying and stealing and betraying everything we built together. You were the best thing in my life, and I'm sorry I ruined it. I stayed with him for an hour, holding his hand and talking about Emma and Michael, about memories from when we were young, about anything except the criminal enterprise that had brought us to this point. David passed away on December 18th, 3 months after his fake funeral. This time, it was real, and this time, I was there holding his hand when he took his last breath. Agent Ross arranged for a small private service with just me, Emma, Michael, and a handful of people who had known David before everything fell apart. There was no elaborate funeral, no crowds of mourners, no pretense that he was anything other than what he had been, a complicated man who had done terrible things and then tried unsuccessfully to atone for them. Michael surprised me by crying at the service. I thought I could stay angry until the end, he said afterward. But seeing him actually die, seeing him gone forever, I realized that anger was just covering up how much I'm going to miss him. Even with everything he did, he was still my dad. Emma stood between us, and we held each other while we mourned not just David's death, but the death of the family we'd thought we were. The trials began in January. Robert Chen pleaded guilty to multiple counts of money laundering, conspiracy, and racketeering in exchange for a 20-year sentence instead of life. During his sentencing hearing, he made a statement that the judge allowed despite objections from the prosecutors. "I want to apologize to my sister-in-law, Victoria, and my niece and nephew, Emma and Michael," he said, his voice emotionless. "I brought my brother into this business, and I'm responsible for everything that happened afterward. David tried to get out, and I wouldn't let him. I threatened him and manipulated him and kept him trapped in a situation he desperately wanted to escape. He died trying to make things right, and I took away his chance to do that while he was still healthy. That burden is mine to carry." I don't know if he meant it or if it was a calculated attempt to rehabilitate his image, but I appreciated the acknowledgement that David had at least tried to fix his mistakes, even if it was too little too late. Over the next 6 months, I testified at 4 different trials. Each time, I had to relive the discovery of David's crimes, the fear of Robert's threats, the terrible knowledge that our entire life had been built on suffering. The defense attorneys tried to paint me as either completely naive or secretly complicit, but Agent Ross had prepared me well for their tactics. By summer, most of the major trials were concluded. 31 people received prison sentences ranging from 5 years to life. The FBI recovered over $400 million in assets. Several major drug trafficking operations were disrupted. Agent Ross called it a massive success for law enforcement. To me, it was just the dismantling of the lie my marriage had been. Emma, Michael, and I slowly rebuilt our lives in our small apartment. Emma went back to her graphic design work, though she lost several clients who didn't want to be associated with David Chen's daughter. Michael struggled more, becoming withdrawn and cynical in ways that broke my heart. I got a job as a bookkeeper for a small nonprofit, using the accounting skills David had taught me years ago for something good instead of something evil. We didn't talk about David much. The subject was too raw, too complicated. But sometimes I'd catch Emma looking at old photos with an expression of such profound loss that I knew she was grieving not just her father, but her entire childhood, wondering which memories were real and which were tainted by his secret crimes. One evening in September, almost a year after the funeral that had started everything, the 3 of us sat on our tiny balcony watching the sunset. It wasn't much of a view, just the parking lot and a strip of sky between buildings, but it was ours, and we'd earned it honestly. "Mom," Emma said suddenly, "do you think Dad really loved us?" I thought about the question carefully because it mattered so much. "Yes," I said finally. "I think he loved us in the only way he knew how. It wasn't enough, and it wasn't healthy, and it definitely wasn't wise, but it was real. He just loved himself more." Michael added, not quite bitterly, "Or he loved his comfort more. Or his pride. He loved a lot of things more than he loved doing the right thing." "That's probably true," I acknowledged, "but I also think he was weak and scared and trapped by choices he made before he fully understood the consequences. That doesn't excuse what he did, but it makes him human instead of just a villain." "Are we going to be okay?" Emma asked, and I heard the little girl she'd been underneath the grown woman she'd become. "Eventually," I promised. "It's going to take time, and there are going to be hard days, and we're never going to get back what we lost. But we have each other, and we have the truth now. Painful as it is. We're going to be okay." That night, after Emma and Michael had gone to bed, I sat alone in the dark living room thinking about David. I thought about the young man I'd fallen in love with who had seemed so honest and straightforward. I wondered when he'd changed, or if he'd always had the capacity for corruption, and I'd just been too naive to see it. I thought about the husband who'd held me during my mother's death, and the father who'd taught Michael to ride a bike, and the partner who'd danced with me in our kitchen. All those versions of him had been real, even though they'd coexisted with the criminal and the liar. I thought about his final months faking his death to protect us, gathering evidence to expose the network he'd helped build, dying in FBI custody far from his family. He'd tried to make amends even though it was impossibly too late. That had to count for something, even if it didn't erase everything else. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, and for a moment my heart stopped. Some irrational part of my brain thinking it might be David again reaching out from beyond death. But it was just Agent Ross checking in, as she did periodically, to make sure we were managing okay. "We're doing fine," I texted back. "One day at a time. That's all anyone can do," she replied. "You and your children have shown remarkable resilience. David would be proud." I didn't respond to that because I didn't know how I felt about David's hypothetical pride. But I saved the message anyway, because some days I needed the reminder that we were resilient, that we'd survived something that could have destroyed us. A year later, on the anniversary of David's real death, the three of us visited his grave. He was buried in a small cemetery on the edge of town, far from our old neighborhood and the life we'd had before. His headstone was simple, just his name and dates with no epitaph because we couldn't agree on what words could possibly encompass who he'd been. Emma placed flowers on the grave, white roses that had been his favorite. Michael stood with his hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. I just stood and looked at the stone and thought about everything that had brought us to this moment. "Goodbye, David," I said quietly. "I hope you found whatever peace you were looking for. We're going to be okay without you. We're going to build lives that aren't based on lies and profit from suffering. We're going to be better than you were. And maybe someday I'll remember you without anger, without betrayal, without all this complicated pain. But today, I'm just saying goodbye." We walked back to the car together, the three of us, and drove away from the cemetery. Behind us, David remained in the ground, finally at rest after all his running and hiding and desperate attempts at redemption. Ahead of us was an uncertain future, but it was ours, and it was honest, and that was enough. 2 years after David's death, I was sitting in a coffee shop near our apartment when I saw a familiar face across the room. It took me a moment to place her because she looked different than I remembered, older and more tired. But then I recognized Jasmine Whitmore, the wife of James Whitmore, the funeral director who'd helped David fake his death. She saw me at the same moment and her face went pale. For a second, I thought she might run, but instead, she stood up and walked over to my table. "Mrs. Chen," she said quietly, "I didn't expect to see you here." I gestured to the empty chair across from me. "Sit down if you want." She hesitated, then sat, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup like she needed its warmth. "I want to apologize for what my husband did. He told me everything after the FBI arrested him. He said David paid him $50,000 to fake the death and switch the bodies. James lost his funeral home and his license and served 18 months in prison for his part in it. I know. I followed all the cases. I'm sorry your husband got caught up in David's mess." Jasmine shook her head. "James made his own choices. The money was tempting, and he rationalized it by telling himself he was helping a dying man's final wish. But he knew it was wrong, and he did it anyway. Just like David did," I said without bitterness, just stating a fact. "Just like David," she agreed. We sat in silence for a moment, two women whose lives had been upended by the choices desperate men had made. "How are you doing?" she asked. "Managing. We lost almost everything, but we're rebuilding. My kids are doing better than I expected." Emma's engaged to a good man who knows everything about her father and loves her anyway. Michael's in therapy and starting to work through his anger. I'm learning who I am without David and without the life we built together. That's good. That's really good. And you? James and I divorced. I couldn't stay married to someone who'd been so willing to break the law for money. I moved to this neighborhood to start over where nobody knows my history. It's lonely, but it's honest. I understood that more than she probably knew. Honesty was its own kind of survival. Mrs. Chen, there's something I need to tell you. Something James told me before we split up that I've been carrying around ever since. What is it? The body in your husband's casket, the John Doe from the county morgue. James told me who it was. It was a man named Richard Pearson. He was 58 years old, and he died of liver failure the same day David was supposed to die. He had no family, no friends who came forward, nobody to claim him or mourn him. James said it made the switch easier because nobody would ever ask questions or want to exhume the body. But Mrs. Chen, Richard Pearson was a person. He had a life, even if it ended alone and unclaimed. And he's buried under your husband's name, with nobody knowing he's there. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Why are you telling me this? Because it's been haunting me. That man deserves to have his real name on his grave. He deserves to be acknowledged as a person who existed and mattered, even if nobody was there when he died. And I think you're the only person who might care enough to do something about it. She was right. Richard Pearson had been a pawn in David's desperate scheme, just like I'd been, just like our children had been, just like everyone who'd gotten caught in the web of lies. But unlike the rest of us, Richard Pearson had no voice and no identity anymore. I contacted Agent Ross that afternoon and told her what Jasmine had shared. Agent Ross made some calls, and within a week, we had confirmation of Richard Pearson's identity and history. He'd been a veteran who'd struggled with alcoholism after returning from Vietnam. He'd lost touch with his family decades ago. He'd died alone in a county hospital with no possessions except the clothes he'd been wearing when he was admitted. The FBI worked with the cemetery to have a proper headstone placed on the grave with Richard Pearson's real name, his birth and death dates, and a simple epitaph that I'd suggested. Richard Pearson, veteran, gone but not forgotten. David's name was removed completely. When the new headstone was installed, I brought Emma and Michael to see it. This is the man who was in the casket at Dad's funeral, I explained. His name was Richard Pearson, and he deserved better than to be buried under someone else's identity. We stood there for a while, the three of us, looking at a stranger's grave and thinking about the ripple effects of deception and how many lives can be touched by one person's choices. "Mom?" Emma said softly. "Where is Dad actually buried?" "In a different section of the cemetery. Do you want to see his real grave?" She thought about it, then nodded. Michael came too, even though I could see the reluctance in his posture. David's actual grave was marked with the simple headstone we'd chosen 2 years ago. The flowers Emma had placed there on the anniversary of his death had long since withered away. "This feels more real somehow," Michael said, seeing his actual grave instead of the fake one. "Everything about Dad was complicated," Emma said, "even his death." We stood there together, and I realized that we'd finally reached a kind of acceptance. Not forgiveness exactly, and not forgetting, but acceptance that David had been a flawed, complicated man who'd made terrible choices and then tried inadequately to make amends. He'd hurt us profoundly, and we'd carry those scars forever. But we were also more than just his victims. We were survivors who'd chosen to build something better from the ruins. As we walked back to the car, I thought about the message that had started everything, the text at David's fake funeral claiming he was alive. In a way, he'd been telling me the truth in his final act of deception. He'd been alive in that moment, alive and desperate, and trying to protect us in the most misguided way possible. But now, he was really gone, and we were really free. Free from the lies and the fear and the weight of his secrets. That night, I took out the phone I'd used to communicate with David during those terrifying weeks when I'd thought I was losing my mind. I'd kept it even though I'd never use it again, keeping it as evidence of everything we'd survived. I scrolled through our final messages, reading his apologies and explanations and desperate justifications. Then I powered it off for the last time and put it in a box with other mementos from that period. Someday, maybe years from now, I'd look through that box and remember this time in my life. But for now, I needed to focus on the present and the future, on building a life that was completely and honestly mine. Emma's wedding was in the spring. She married a kind man named Thomas, who worked as a teacher and who'd stood by her through all the revelation about her father's crimes. At the reception, as I watched them dance, I felt a complicated mix of happiness and grief. David should have been there to walk his daughter down the aisle, to make a toast, to cry proud father tears. But he'd forfeited that right through his choices, and now Thomas's father had stepped into that role with grace and generosity. Michael gave the toast instead, and he surprised everyone by mentioning David. "My father taught me a lot of things," Michael said, his voice steady. Some of them were good lessons about hard work and integrity. Others were warnings about what happens when you compromise your values for money and comfort. I learned from both. Emma did too. We're standing here today as better people than we might have been because we learned the hard way that honesty matters more than success. That family means being truthful with each other even when it hurts, and that love without integrity is just pretty wrapping paper around an empty box. So let's toast to Emma and Thomas, who are building their marriage on truth and real love. May they never have to learn the lessons we learned. The reception ended late, and as I drove home alone, I thought about David one last time. I hoped, wherever he was, if there was anywhere to be after death, he could see that his children had survived and thrived despite everything he'd put them through. I hoped he understood that his greatest legacy wasn't the money he'd made, or the crimes he'd committed, or even the evidence he'd gathered at the end. His greatest legacy was Emma and Michael, two good people who'd chosen to be better than their father had been. And maybe, in some small way, that was enough redemption for a complicated man who'd run out of time to fully make amends.